Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Corey, and I'm the founder of beatingtrauma.com. I am here today to talk about trauma recovery. And today I'm going to put the focus on specifically memory work. And that's kind of how I refer to it when we're talking about the potential for recovered or repressed memories being in the picture and working with those memories to help ourselves heal. I will start by saying I do think that it is generally memories are highly overlooked in the whole recovery realm, and the people who are out there speaking about recovery don't spend a ton of time on memories. And I think it gets overlooked, and I think it is an absolutely critical part of our journey to healing. So I want to spend a little bit of time today just kind of discussing why I think it's so important, because it really is. And I can kind of maybe give you a different perspective than what you may have heard at other times. While many of us may remember our childhoods, and many of us may remember aspects of our childhood, but maybe we don't remember all of our childhoods, I will say that there is a high likelihood that if you experience trauma as a child, you have something you don't remember. It's really important for us to recognize that the trauma is likely there, and that there is a real high likelihood also that there are memories there that we don't have. Most people don't like to acknowledge this. They don't like to consider this possibility. But I'm here to tell you that it is likely there is something. There is also, not only is there a high likelihood that you don't remember something, but there is a high likelihood that whatever it is you don't remember, you are desperately defending again. So there's a strong possibility that whatever it is that you don't remember, you're also very committed to not remembering. It's why this conversation can be so hard to have. Now, there can be a lot of reasons why we are committed to not remembering. It isn't as simple as we just have really annoying defenders that don't want us to know things. I mean, that's not the reason, although sometimes it feels like it. In reality, we may not think we're allowed to remember. There may be threats that have been placed on us remembering. There may be contracts, as I call them, that are associated with the karma kids that say that we're not allowed to remember this particular thing. It can be a pretty scary scenario for our defenders to let us remember something. So it's important that we keep that in mind when we're on this journey, that we will have a lot of strong defenses against remembering not everything, but a lot of things. So it's good to acknowledge that. Based on those two facts, there's probably something you don't remember, and there's likely to be strong defense against whatever that is, right? We're going to keep going and talk a little bit about the fact that these memories are likely to be storing with them, okay? And those emotions can't be released without us having an understanding of the memory. Now, again, it doesn't mean we have to know every single little teeny tiny thing about the memory in order for us to process it. Generally speaking, the most important part of the memory is the emotional processing, because the emotions and the unconscious beliefs that come with those emotions, which I'll talk more about in a minute, have a tendency to be what drives our life patterns. We need to get enough of the memory back to understand why it's impacting our belief systems, how it's impacting our belief systems, and what it is emotionally that we have been carrying that, of course, now we want to let go of. Again, we're not necessarily going to have to remember what color the wallpaper was, or what the exact age we were when something happens. Those details can be hard to figure out with repressed memories, but we can get enough information back to process the emotional impact that that particular memory is having on us. And that's what we want to be able to do, right? Some people, when they start working with me on memories, they have this sense that an emotion or or a memory is going to come back to us almost like a movie reel. It's going to be very clear. It's going to be very obvious. I'm here to tell you that it is almost never that. It is oftentimes this sort of a hodgepodge of like emotions and visual flashes and body sensations that we actually have to do a bit of detective work to get to like the full understanding that we need to get to. It's not simple to retrieve a memory back. And it's why it can be easy for us to kind of fall for the defenses that show up, around these memories. Again, I've had a lot of inner sabotage going on today with me. So clearly I have parts that do not want me to be discussing this, but this is such an important topic. So I'm going to keep going. So we want to get to those memories because we want to process that emotions. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is that memories are often driving our most frustrating life patterns. Okay. This is the number one reason why we want to get to the memories, because they are very often driving our most frustrating life patterns. Because when memories are there, like I said earlier, they come with emotion, but they also come with beliefs. Okay. They come with understandings about how the world works. And those emotions and those beliefs drive what is happening to us in the world. So when we have an extremely frustrating life pattern, there is a very good chance that we are repeating that pattern, that belief system, that emotional impact over and over again because we have not remembered what we need to remember about childhood. In many cases, those life patterns are quite literally playing out scenarios from childhood in an attempt to wake us up, to make us see things that we haven't seen. And unfortunately, that often happens by creating suffering, right, in our current life. So we will go, I want to do something about this. I want to change this. I don't want to live like this anymore, right? And that brings us to recovery. But again, a big part of that recovery is getting to those memories so we can stop those really frustrating life patterns for once and for all. That's the goal here. You may be asking now, okay, Elizabeth, how in the world do I get at these memories, right? And the number one way to get at these memories is to use your current life and the triggers in it as a gateway to the unconscious, which is where all of these memories live. So we want to take current life and the triggers of current life, which are those very frustrating life patterns, use those to kind of open up that gateway to what we don't remember. And there is a way to do that. The biggest way, of course, you're going to be shocked to hear this coming from me, is writing from the emotional trigger that shows up when that frustrating pattern appears. Okay. As we write from that emotion, we start to get a sense of where that started, right? Where did it first kick off for us? So I am going to give you some examples of that because I know that so far I've been speaking in theory, right? And that doesn't always work when we are trying to do this in real life. So I'm going to walk through, I have 5 examples here, and you can also chime in with what examples you may have seen in your own life, or even if it's just an example of the frustrating pattern, maybe you haven't worked out exactly where the memory is somehow. Feel free to bring that into the discussion as well. So, but I'm going to start off by going through my list, and as your comments come in, I will address those as well. So the first example I want to talk about is one that I see in almost every single person that I work with. So it is self-erasure in relationship, specifically because conditional love or lack of acceptance are present in that relationship. This is an extremely frustrating life pattern for a lot of us because we probably grew up in an environment where we just could not be our authentic selves. It was not something that was going to be available to us. We had to meet the needs of others. We had to take care of others. We had to be responsible for others' emotions. And we had to kind of appease those others. This is often the case in a childhood where there is trauma and there is pervasive abuse in the home. So we start to erase ourselves. And unfortunately, when we get to adulthood, we continue to erase ourselves because we want to make sure that we get that little tiny bit of love and acceptance that we've always wanted, right, from others. Unfortunately, we will often do this with people that are a bit of a reminder of our past, that kind of keep our patterns playing out. Our goal is not, our goal from our parts is not to keep suffering again and again and again in these relationships. But generally, we do repeat patterns from childhood because we are trying to find a resolution. And we think that this next time we'll finally figure out how to be, how to behave to get the love and acceptance we always wanted. Now, you may already know how this ends. We don't get it, right? And we keep the self-erasing process in play. That pattern continues as we go from relationship to relationship, looking for somebody who will allow us to be who we really are and consistently compromising who we really are because they won't, right? Very frustrating, very lonely way of being in the world, right? So we know we don't want to be like this, but there are parts in the system who are terrified to be our true selves because in childhood, it was absolutely unacceptable to be that. Sometimes we can write from this feeling, right? This feeling could show up in a lot of different ways. It could show up as futility, like what's the point in even trying? You know, I'm never going to get the acceptance I want. It could show up as sort of this false hope from the love seeker, which eventually turns to grief. It's like, this is going to be the person. This is finally going to be the one. They're finally going to give me what I'm looking for. I just have to try harder. I just have to figure this out. Also, a really good direction to go with writing. Or you could be feeling anger, right? You could be feeling a lot of anger right now that you are consistently being rejected for who you are. And that is also a very helpful writing to try here. More than likely, there are some memories to show up around this topic. Our parts may want to share with us times that we attempted to be authentic and we were rejected for it. There usually are these kind of memories present, and our parts and their emotions are very experience-based and evidence-based. So the more we listen to them about the experiences we had with this particular pattern, the more we can move those belief systems out and start to change it. And you may have already guessed that the way that we change it is to step out and be more authentic and work with the fear, right? So this is another writing prompt, the fear that says these people are going to reject me. And I can't be rejected again, right? So I want to say, Bernadette is saying, yeah, stayed at marriage until I had to leave for that little bit of love. Now on my own, unsure of future. Yeah, well, and sometimes our future becomes a bit more hopeful when we don't stay in the relationship where we're not getting any love. Because, or where we feel like we can't be ourselves. I tend to see the future as a whole lot brighter. I know this goes against what society says. It says we're all supposed to be in a relationship, but I tend to see the future as much brighter when we are alone long enough to start to recognize who we really are and becoming more authentic as a result of that. But the best way to break this pattern is to process the pain that shows up when there is nobody there to accept and love us for who we are. Working with that love seeker pain, working with the fears that come up when we consider being more authentic, and working with the anger and futility that show up because, of course, we are so sick and tired of this pattern. And it's good to let all of that. And I promise that as you do write from those emotions, really write from the emotions, you will start to get a sense of what the examples are, what the memories are that are associated with this pattern. Okay. The next pattern I want to talk about has some similarities to the one I just discussed, but it's about being abandoned by others. So a big pattern for us is feeling isolated or outcasted or abandoned by others. Many times, because we were attempting to be more authentic as children, we started to develop this pattern where people just kind of didn't want to be around us when we were who we were meant to be. Now, that doesn't mean that who we were meant to be is a bad thing. It just means the people who were in our lives at the time could not accept us for who we were. A lot of times when it's family of origin, it's because they're projecting their rejection of self. That was many times for a really similar reason onto us. And this happens a lot, especially with things like authentic talents, interests, extroversion, the ability to talk a lot to people when you're not supposed to, according to the family. Those things have a tendency to get a strong rejection from abusive families, as the parents or other members of the family who have also had to sort of reject this aspect of themselves, project that same rejection onto us. And we will often feel this in an abandonment or an isolation or outcasting, because I'll be honest, abusers know that children need support, like they need somebody in their lives, right? And so they know that if they use things like outcasting and abandonment and isolation, the child will become more amenable to whatever it is that the standards are within that family. And that's just a big truth. Of saying rejected for being the wrong gender. Yes, absolutely. When abusive families, when there's a particular gender they expect, they absolutely will do that. And we often see that if girls are rejected because they are girls, they will have a tendency to move towards more masculine traits. They will sort of reject the femininity that's within them. Don't get me wrong, men reject their femininity too. It's everybody has both. But women will become significantly masculine in nature when they are rejected for being feminine. And so, yes, again, this is coming from that place. So we lose ourselves, or in this case, like half of ourselves, right? For the purposes of getting some kind of acceptance, some kind of love, and not being abandoned and isolated by people who are rejecting us for who we are. But yeah, that's another great example. I mean, I definitely did that. I became very, very accentuated most of my masculine traits, went and worked in IT. Well, at the time when I first started, it was mostly men, and just, climbed my way to the top of that organization by just being very, very focused on the masculine traits that organization was particularly, was desiring to have in their employees. And it worked for me for a while, but I was so anxious and so not who I really was on a lot of levels that I could not maintain that level of inauthenticity. It just was not going to work for me. So that's just an example. But yes, a lot of us are doing that. Jen is saying, I feel abandonment most painful. Yeah, abandonment, what that tells us, and this is sort of what I was saying earlier, when you have a particular pattern that is so frustrating, that is the most frustrating pattern you have, that just keeps you up at night with the level of pain that it is causing you. That is your pattern, and there are likely to be memories still to be processed, along with the emotions attached to them, to move out of those patterns for once and for all. And I, it's a critical component of our healing journey. So it's something to keep watching for. This is something I work with a lot of my clients on. It's we put the detective hats on, right? And we look for the memories, the signs of the memories, what's coming up, how is the universe reminding us of something, what are we seeing, what's happening in our lives, let's piece it together to try to get to the memories that are there. And we do it. It's not easy. It's a tough one because we have so many defenses trying to stop us. Okay. The next one I want to talk about is huge for my clients and me. When I say my clients, I generally mean me. And that is feeling stuck on our authentic path. Okay. Most people who are working with me have begun to discover what it is that they're really kind of wanting to do here, authentically. They've started to get a sense of what that is. And then it becomes probably even more frustrating because they feel stuck. They feel blocked. They have a lot of inner parts coming forward and saying, don't you dare. Don't go down that road. That road is scary. And we can get pretty darn stuck when we are starting to move in the direction of our authentic paths. And I've certainly experienced this a lot in my own journey. It's important to know that we will have memories that show the ways in which our authentic path was discouraged for us. And I'll be honest, there's going to be a lot of them, and they're going to be pretty diverse in the different messages that we may have experienced around why we are not allowed to be our authentic selves. And it can be everything from just a general inability to be successful, right? So our abusive families told us you're not allowed to be successful, or you're not allowed to be successful on your own, only if you are supported by family, which means if you step back from family, it becomes more of an issue. And you're not allowed to be successful at the particular thing that you are supposed to be successful at. Now, you may be wondering, well, how would my family have known what that thing was? They knew. They knew. Because as a child, you would have been expressing that thing. To know what to do, again, very unconscious on the part of our family members, because this is usually something that's been generations of suppression. They know exactly what to do to move that same rejection into the next generation. So, feeling stuck on our authentic path does take a lot of memory work and a lot of writing from emotions. I would say the biggest two emotions for my stuckness when it comes to this is going to be futility. Futility is always the first thing that comes up when I start thinking of a new idea that I want to implement for this work. The first thing that happens is I hear, what's the point? And I start to feel this really intense, just depressive blah, right? That's usually the first thing that happens as soon as I get a really cool idea. So I have to work with that. And it helps that I know it's coming, and I do know it's coming. But the thing that's right underneath that futility is shame. And the way I like to describe shame when it comes to the authentic path is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are going down that road? You don't have anything to offer anyone. This is ridiculous. Get back in your place and live life like everybody else and stop trying to be special. Okay. That's an example of what my shame sounds like, especially related to this particular issue. Why? Because I have memories of people saying that exact thing to me. And until I figured out who said it to me and why they said it, I struggle to move past it. This is what we really want to spend time on. We want to get a sense of where we heard these things, where we heard these blocks from, when it happened, what were we doing when it happened, within reason. We don't have to know perfectly, so that we can move to the other side of these blocks. Okay. All right. I'll give one more example here, because I know I'm getting a little low on time, but this one is feeling shamed or even baited for our emotions. Okay. This is a big one here because oftentimes we know, for those of us who are on this journey, at least this is what I see, we tend to be people who have not completely shut down our emotions. Many people who are not on this journey are not on this journey because they have shut down all of their emotions. And for those of us who are, we probably never succeeded at that entirely. And that's not a bad thing. That means that we just never shut down. But what that also means is that we probably spent a lot of time hearing how we're so emotional and we're so sensitive. And, then maybe they would kind of poke at us until we blew up, and then they'd say, oh, you're such an angry person. So we may have had our emotions used against us a lot. That is also a pattern. And that pattern is definitely tied to memories for us. Obviously, abusive families of origin do not want us to be particularly emotional because they themselves have suppressed that emotion in themselves a lot. And so they may choose to shame us for our emotions as a way of making us suppress those emotions. Now, in many cases, we did suppress a lot of emotion. But this is something we also want to get in touch with. What were the messages we were given, right? Were we told we were too sensitive? Were we told, you'll never make it in this world because you're just such an emotional person? Like, what kind of messages were we told? Oftentimes when we write from emotional shaming, emotional gaslighting, emotional invalidation, we will start to get a sense of the memories around this. And they often are memories of being told things, but we may have also experienced some punishments for certain emotional outbursts that we may have had as children, stuff that we don't remember. I've had many clients come to me and say, I never express my emotion at home. And I usually question that, because a lot of times we have expressed emotion at home, but we've faced quite severe reactions to the point where we had to no longer remember that. And so it sits in our system, continuing to block our ability to emotionally express in a way that is, in fact, quite healthy for us and for others, right? These are 4 examples of patterns that are going to be backed up in your system with memories. And while sometimes we may have the memories, many times we don't. And if we do have the memories, that doesn't mean that we've actually processed the emotions that go with them. So we want to start looking for that evidence, looking for those experiences that tie back to these patterns, the belief systems that are driving these patterns. One of the best ways to do that is to try to get as concrete as we possibly can around our exact experiences that are driving those patterns to keep happening. I promise they are there. Let's see. Elka is saying, wow, this is triggering today. Remembering the years of our downs my brother never experienced. Yes, I am so sensitive for having a problem with the years of making me feel small and insignificant. Yes. So this is, and so this is another pattern, right? And so this pattern is the pattern of comparison that you're talking about here, where the millionaire superstar brother is compared to you, right? And that comparison is so painful. And more than likely, you've experienced times in your adult life where you have been triangulated by being compared to another person in some way, by a third person. This pattern comes from these memories and the emotions that are tied to those memories. So working with the memories, working with the emotions tied to those memories can help you begin to shift out of that pattern of triangulation and comparison so that you can stop feeling like that, right? But there's going to be a lot of shame writing associated with this particular one, but also anger writing will definitely be here as well. So Jan is saying, this is such a great session today. It is feeling very raw listening as I identify so clearly, especially painful as I watch it play out in my granddaughter's life. And I can see it, but I am helpless to change it, only to be present for her and me. Yes. And I will say, as somebody who's had a lot of really dysfunctional relational patterns in my life, maybe even all of them, I don't even know if it feels that way. I have struggled to kind of watch my kids and see like which patterns they may be working with. And sometimes it's very painful. I try to plant seeds with them based on what I learned about myself and how I've learned to interact with people in the world. And it does help, but keep doing your emotional processing and she will see what you're doing. And she may decide, yeah, that looks like a better way to go. We can influence people just by our own example more than we think we can. And, the truth is, even people who are saying, I can't do what you're doing, they probably see that there could be some benefit to it. So thank you all so much for joining me today. And I look forward to talking to you guys next Tuesday with another trauma topic. And if there's anything you want me to discuss, something that would be really helpful for you, feel free to send me an email and let me know what you want to hear about. My email is elizabeth@beatingtrauma.com, and that is Elizabeth with an S. So email me and let me know. Thank you all so much, and I will talk to you next week, same time, same place.